Farm Bureau Young Farmer and Agriculturist Discussion Meet Final. I am Ethan Giebel, last year's State Discussion Meet winner. I will serve as moderator for this morning's State Discussion Meet Final. Serving as timekeeper for this round is State FFA President Sally Elders. The winner of this state contest will represent Wisconsin Farm Bureau at the National Discussion Meet Contest held in conjunction with the American Farm Bureau annual meeting in Orlando, Florida on January 9th, 2016. The topic selected for today's discussion is, how do we balance agriculture's water needs with maintaining vibrant communities? How do historical water rights influence this discussion? The contestants today are Ryan Klusendorf, Krista Hoffman, Josh Shank, and Nate Zimdars. Before we begin, I will review the procedure we will follow for the finals. The contest will begin with each contestant in voluntary order making a 30-second opening statement. The timekeeper will raise a large red card at 30 seconds. After each contestant has given his or her opening remarks, I will announce that open discussion will commence for a total of 25 minutes. The timekeeper will indicate when 20 minutes have elapsed by raising a large yellow card. The contestants then have 5 minutes to complete their discussion. Then, the timekeeper will raise a large red card to indicate a total of 25 minutes have elapsed. I will stop the discussion. The contestants will then have 1 minute of quiet time to prepare their 1-minute closing statements. The timekeeper will raise a large red card at 1 minute. The contestants will then give their 1-minute closing statements in voluntary order. The timekeeper will raise a large red card at 1 minute. Contestants, you may now, in voluntary order, make your 30-second opening statements. Please stand and direct your opening statement to the audience.
Good morning. I'm so glad everybody could come out here this morning and listen to this wonderful topic, because we need you. Unless somebody like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. The lower eggs. Today I would like to enter discussion, who's using the water, my experiences with that, farmer-led efforts, and what our policy is. Thank you.
When the well is dry, we learn the worth of water. Benjamin Franklin. Currently, under the U.S. Clean Water Act, all 50 states have a water quality policy. I plan to discuss how water rights differ between eastern and western states, how state and federal policy will evolve, and how farmers and ranchers play a role.
Water is one of the natural resources that Wisconsinites often take for granted. With abundant surface water, groundwater, and typically enough rain, we're able to meet our personal needs and our production goals. Despite this, there are challenges arising at a local level that address water quality and water quantity issues. It is important that we take steps to proactively approach this policy issue as we evaluate the historical water laws that created the system we have today, and also efforts producers can have in order to meet industry standards.
President Bill Clinton once said, "When we lose our sense of community, the American dream begins to wither." We as Farm Bureau members know the importance of our communities. We also know the importance of issues such as water usage, which is both vitally important to us in the agricultural industry and those in our communities. Today I would like to talk about current water usage issues. I would also like to talk about some historical water rights that we have here in the state of Wisconsin. And I'd also like to talk about, finally, how we can work together with our community to address these issues.
You have heard the opening statements. The The contestants may now proceed with the discussion. Contestants, please direct your discussion to your fellow panel members.
I think it's important that we begin the discussion by talking about what the key issue is, and that's water usage and how it affects our community. One of the big things right now is a report that was released by the Department of Natural Resources just a couple years ago that said 58% of all water impairment in our rivers, streams, and lakes was due in some form by agriculture. Now that's a serious issue we need to address. And I know for the most part that may be directly in some circumstances, but most of the time it's indirectly. But we currently have regulations that we in the agricultural industry are working to uphold so that we can avoid this problem. I know the biggest issue I think many of us are facing is runoff. That can be a very big issue, especially when we have the abundance of water here in the state of Wisconsin. I know for me back home on our family farm, over the last couple of years, we've taken a couple of steps to really address this issue. We put in some grass around their ditches. We have a river that runs through our farmland that's called the Grand River, and we want to make sure that there's no runoff that goes into any part of that. So we currently have grass that goes about 50 feet from the ditch line, so we're making sure that nothing gets close to that at all. And I would just like to ask you, Ryan, if there's some issues in your local community that you're seeing that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that quality issue up. I mean, when we're talking about balancing our water use, we got to look at quality also. I'll get to that farmer-led watershed. Farmers leading the quality issue, putting them out in the forefront, letting the regulations step back. We got examples of this from our Portage County District 8 representative, the Aaron family. They're put in retention ponds. They're collecting the runoff from their fields. And if there's phosphorus in that water, it's staying on the farm. It's a closed loop system. So it's conserving water for the area, and they're putting it back out on their farm. They had a field day to walk around their farm. They had all the local DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, the Land Conservation. They had a representation from the Ron Kine's office there that are interested in seeing this. Chris, I know you're in your county planning. Is there anything that your county is doing with these efforts also?
Right, there's a lot of efforts that are happening at a local level to address water quality and water quantity issues. And I really believe that this is something that is very important to take up at a state and local level. Within our county specifically, and every county in the state actually has a land and water plan that specifically works with farmers and conservation groups to make sure that we're meeting goals for our community. So I think that's really important, but really to understand what we do at a local level, we need to take a step back and really understand what the historical water rights are in the United States. So in the Midwest and eastern part of the country, we're actually underneath a public doctrine, which means water is public domain. Anybody has access to it. But it's a little different how it's done out west, which is a little interesting, especially since the lack of water that often affects that region, which is a first right, first claim, first right. So essentially, if you're a farmer that was out there first, you get to claim that water, and then municipalities get to do it, get to come in there afterwards if farmers were the first ones out there. So here in Wisconsin, this means that water is for public use. And so when we're really looking at what we need to do as an agriculture industry, and also what is necessary for our communities, maintaining those vibrant communities, we're looking at water quality and water quantity issues, especially since so much of our community and other aspects of our economy are based on tourism, people living and working in our communities, and we need that as an agriculture industry as well. So Josh, how do you think that impacts? How can we really balance those agriculture needs and those communities?
Yeah, I'd like to bring in the state of California because that's where the prior appropriation laws started, that doctrine during the gold rush. And as the West was settled, it was first come, first served. The state of California now, they're not just only on the prior appropriation, but they also have the public domain as well. They realize that their water needs for their metropolitan areas are so great, and they're trying to balance their metropolitan areas with their agriculture. To answer your question, one way we balance that is to recognize that everyone has a right to clean, safe water. Obviously, in the western states, recreation is going to be limited in comparison to the eastern states where water is just so abundant. Nate, you were talking about personally putting in buffers and stuff, and we talked about the DNR and stuff. I guess from a state regulation standpoint, we have not only DNR, we also have Department of Trade and Consumer Protection, DACAP, and they have a lot of regulation over things. We recently had the Waters of the U.S. Act. It was repealed, but the question is, on that local level, what jurisdiction does the federal government have when the state is already there, and should we have federal jurisdiction?
I think you bring up a good point talking about the Department of Trade and Consumer Protection. They actually are doing a really good job working with farmers here in the state to address water quality issues and how we can work with our community to address this serious issue. One of the key things that DACAP has been doing over the last couple of years is that they've been getting funding up to $250,000 a year to help farmers out addressing some of these issues. I know back home on our family farm, last couple of years we've been storing some of our feed on a dirt base. And when it rains, obviously, water can accumulate. And our biggest fear is that there could possibly be some contamination that could go in that water. So right now we're actually seeking out a grant to hopefully lay down a cement surface so that contamination is a non-issue in that circumstance. So, and then we can collect the rainwater so that doesn't go back out and contaminate nearby fields. And going along with that, I'd also like to talk about some of the historical water usage here in the state of Wisconsin. We were discussing the DNR a little bit earlier, and the DNR has a big part here in the state of Wisconsin. We have over 15,000 lakes, many rivers and streams, and a lot of people like to come up here and enjoy that. I live next to Green Lake, which is one of the deepest lakes here in the state of Wisconsin, and a lot of people from Illinois like going up there because they think of it as the North Woods, and it's my backyard, so I don't think so. But it's great because it brings a lot of tourism to our area, a lot of money going into the local economy, and a big fear that people have been worried about is that there could be some runoff that can maybe get in the lake, and there can be some algae or maybe something else that goes on, and then people won't want to go to that lake. So it's our responsibility as Farm Bureau members and those that are involved in the agricultural industry to really take on this issue. Krista, I'd like to ask you just a little bit more about maybe what we can do in conjunction with our communities to address these serious issues, because that's something that's of vital importance to them.
Yes. Nate, I think you make a really good point about the involvement of DACAP and the DNR in our local water issues. And so at the local level, we have programs that allow for cost sharing for farmers in our communities to take voluntary efforts to preserve those waters. One of the biggest things that I see, especially working in a planning and zoning office and also closely with our land conservation department is that we actually have a lot of unused cost share funds that go back to the state every year. And I know this problem is not necessarily unique to Shawano County. So this is where I believe that the Farm Bureau has a role and an ability to have outreach to farmers to let them know about the programs that exist. If we can have more for our local units of government, that's better. We have the ability to improve the water in our communities, like you mentioned with the Green Lake. And Shawano Lake is where everybody wants to be. And it's really important to make sure that we're addressing those impaired watersheds because Shawano is one of those listed with the DNR. So it's important that we make sure that farmers are taking those active efforts to go out there and preserve and conserve the water quality in our state. And Brian, I know you were mentioning about the farmer-led efforts as well. What else do you think the Farm Bureau can do at a local level to make sure that we're utilizing these programs?
Great, I'm glad you brought that up. We do have a current policy in place. I feel a good strong one on water quality, and that addresses when there's a water quality issue in a watershed that we support the DNR coming in and looking at that and regulating that area. And we support it when the community involvement is on a committee there to look at that with municipality, industry, farmers, and other interests in the area. So I feel that's a great policy we have in place. I know there's legislation that is coming down the pipe from the northeast part of Wisconsin, in the Kewanee area, doing, saying that there's some impaired groundwater. So I feel it's great that we already have policy in place on this, that we're ahead of the game. I mean, that's a good thing about Farm Bureau, that we step up and get ahead of it before it really takes off. Does anybody have
I'd like to add
some
that.
other policy that you might like to bring
So,
up, Josh?
I've got a personal experience. Kewanee County has some very large dairy operations, and right now there's a dairy operation that's proposed to go in my county. And that's one of the large concerns is not only surface water contamination, but groundwater contamination. There's lots of different levels of water and below the ground. How do we protect that? And not necessarily just from the directly water policy, but how do we protect our water from industry, or large industry, not just agriculture, but in general, contaminating our water. And I think that's where it comes back to the state and local level, like you said, Robin, where municipalities, industry, and agriculture are all working together on our town boards and our community boards and on the county boards to make sure that everyone's on the same page and we're protecting our water. Krista, have you had any experiences like that in your county?
Right. One of the things that's really important and was kind of something that I was almost surprised of that happened in Charlotte County. We have a very positive agriculture community. When large farms have expanded in our community, we've literally had no opposition to them in our communities, which is rare, especially when you're looking at places like Kewanee and other areas that are more have a lot of water concerns with their residents as well. And so I think it's an important thing that we ensure that Farm Bureau members have positions on advisory committees to agencies, especially when they're making decisions on water quality policy. I think that's something that's a key point that we can make as Farm Bureau members to making sure that we have people out there participating in these ongoing efforts. One of the models that's already out there is, you kind of see lake groups that make sure that they're taking care of property owners around the lake, come together, support causes to improve their water quality. I think that we as farmers also have the ability to create groups like this and make sure that producer-led efforts are making impacts in our watersheds. Maybe this doesn't mean making a new group. Maybe it means just taking that up more seriously at a local level at a Farm Bureau meeting, having representatives go to existing watershed meetings, and then serving on committees at the state level and local level that are advisory to the regulations that are made. Nate, what do you think we else can do at a state level in order to improve water quality, water quantity issues?
Everyone has a right to fresh and clean water. And I think an important issue that we also need to talk about here in the state of Wisconsin is high-capacity wells. That's a big thing that's going on in state government right now. The DNR, they're holding up processing of high water capacity wells currently. But if you actually look at some of the statistics, out of the 14,000 high-capacity wells that we have here in the state of Wisconsin, only about 700 are for large-scale operations that are agriculturally based. So most of that's actually coming from municipal districts that are using it for cities and towns. So we can't look at this like it's solely an agricultural issue, but there are legitimate concerns that we need to address when it comes to high-capacity wells. There's some farmers that are in a nearby community to me that for a couple of years they weren't able to get the proper permits they needed so that they could continue irrigation. And they tried talking to the DNR, but there was a little bit of hold up with the process just because they put a hold on the application of wells currently. And they actually went out of their way to go talk to their state legislator, and they said what their concern was and asked them if there was anything they could do about it. Well, fortunately, our local state representative is a big proponent of agriculture. So she was able to talk with the DNR, and this application was fortunately able to go through. So now they're back on par with the way things originally were on their operation. But that's a serious issue that we need to talk here about in the state. We need to talk about this current paralysis of this process. How can we jump through that and move over that? And I'd like to ask you, Brian, if you could talk about what you as a Farm Bureau member.
You brought up the high capacity well issues there. We do, as Farm Bureau members, have policy on that also. saying that we want you to submit the permit and get back with an answer in 60 days. We also on our Farm Bureau level have policy set to define, right now the high capacity well is defined as something that's pumping 70 gallons per minute or more. And if you have multiple wells on your property, 1, 2, or 3, those add up cumulatively. And if they add up to that 70 gallons per minute, that is considered a high capacity well. And we as Farm Bureau members would prefer that being, on a well per well basis, so they're not all added up to one thing. I know being on our policy development committee on the state here, representing District 8, I get a chance to meet new people and talk on issues. One of them is Brad Colpin from Marquette County in the Central Sands, where a lot of these high capacity wells are located. And a lot of special interest groups there use Long Lake as a kind of a scare tactic. Pictures of that. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You show up here and nothing, no water in this lake. And Brad mentioned to me that there was a picture in the local library from 1911 with farmers in the lake cutting the marsh for bedding. So we know that lake hasn't been dry since 1911, and there's adequate water in that area for everybody to pump on and adequate balance for the community. So I don't know if anybody else has experiences talking to other farmers in our organization, what their needs are. Carissa?
Right, Brian. I think this comes up with a good point when we need to start balancing what we do as an agriculture industry and what others need in our communities as well. I think it's kind of bringing together the 2 points for me and Brian about the ideas of making sure that we don't get bogged down in the process. I think right now, if we take the chance as agricultural producers to become leaders in water conservation efforts, we won't be faced with this burdensome regulation, even at a state level. If we address this problem as a community right now and create a more of a unified voice and active actions being taken by producers to address these water conservation concerns, I think that's where we can kind of take it to the next level.
Right, because to have the farmers lead this and let our federal organizations kind of step back and not be a regulator, but be a supporter for this.
Exactly. I think that this is a place where we have an opportunity, especially with the structure we have in the Farm Bureau, to really approach our communities, our municipalities, and really sit down and have a conversation and say, what do you need? How can we work together to address these issues? And there are tools out there for agriculture producers to make improvements and to take steps that ensure that we have adequate water available for our municipalities, for recreation opportunities, and also available water quality as well. Nate, looks like you have something on your mind.
Yeah, no, I think that we should definitely start talking about some things that we can do in our local communities, because that's where it all begins for us, is going back home, going to our local county farm bureaus, and really getting involved at the policy level locally. But also,
great. We got, we're the grassroots organization. We have a resolution that's going to be brought forth on Monday that's come from the ground level. Getting back to talking about the farmer-led, that's what's coming up that we want. So we support as Farm Bureau farmer-led watershed initiatives that we're taking the lead on this. I think that's the key thing here, that we're getting out in front of it and taking a stance that we have, balance here, that we are taking care of quality issues and having the land conservation and the Department of Natural Resources being our support group and not our regulators. So I think that's where we're really, to get back that we're helping the communities and we're starting to work together and showing that we are making an effort to balance that issue.
Right, Brian. I think one of the important things when we come together to talk to our municipalities about the issues we face, if we really identify what our priorities are, as farmers, we're looking to make sure that we're meeting our production needs. We're being able to provide water to our animals and making sure that we are producing crops for our growing population and so we can feed the world. At the same time, municipalities are making sure that they have clean and safe drinking water for their residents, and also that they have enough to bring people in and businesses into their community. But really where these two goals combine is making sure that we have an adequate food system in our community that can support our local needs. And so when we really come down and address this as a food systems issue, There is some give and take there from what municipalities need, and being able to understand that we as agriculture producers bring a lot to our communities, both economically and also being able to have the food independence we have here in the United States. As we wrap up our discussion today, I think it's really important that we take the time to decide what we can do at a local level. Something that I think that I will be bringing back to our local Farm Bureau will be the efforts in order to take producer-led initiatives to the next level. How can we get individuals to come out and serve on advisory boards? How do we make sure that they are in position to get on advisory boards at the state level and volunteer to talk to individuals at a local level who make those policy decisions? Also, that we are utilizing the programs that are in place to promote water conservation in our communities. So Ryan, do you want to talk about what you're going to do in your county?
Yeah, the big thing I think we can take away from here is we get behind this, our policy that's coming up with the farmer-led watershed groups. They're, taking the steps to help prevent runoff. This is all things we're doing with cover crops. I do cover crops on my own farm to help runoff. And it's, this is farmer-led. This is coming from our organization to say, we're getting on top of this. We know there's an issue. We're not going to have somebody tell us there's an issue. We're going to take care of it first. And I think that's a big thing I'm going to take back with me and work on. I'd like to also try to implement what John is doing on his farm with those retention ponds to collect the surface water runoff, to utilize that instead of pumping out of the groundwater. Josh, is there any issues you would do with the farmer-led groups?
I've actually had some involvement. I've had discussion with my town chairman on high capacity wells because the proposed dairy is not only for one township currently one township in the county, but there's also been a rumor about them expanding and splitting it up into other townships. And we want to make sure that there's policy in place, protecting our farmers that are there so that they can expand, but also protecting our resources so that we can have scenic beauty within our state. So we can maintain that balance between essentially tax burden and commerce. So I've been involved there. I'm going to go back and I want to discuss some of these policies and how they relate to individual producers at the county Farm Bureau level. I've had some discussion with producers throughout the year on their concerns with the waters of the U.S. and as agriculture expands, what the DNR and DACAP, what the regulations are going to entail. How about you, Nate?
Well, I'm really excited about going back home to Fond du Lac County and implementing an action plan that will involve several different things. One of the key things that I would like to do is be more open about some of the practices that are going on our family farm. There are some people that live in our neighborhood that live on land that's next to our land, and I'd like to talk to them a little bit more about some of the things that we're doing with crops, some of the other things, and ask them if they have any concerns so that we can adequately address those and continue moving forward, all in agreement with our neighbors about what's good for everybody. The other thing, too, I'd like to talk about is funding for things such as projects to prevent water runoff and high-capacity wells and that sort of thing. Because, being in the agricultural industry, money can be tight at sometimes, and we could all use a little bit of assistance. So I'd like to go back home, and I'd like to talk to some of the Farm Bureau leaders in our county, and I'd also like to talk to some other people that are involved in policy making and ask, what is it that we can do as Farm Bureau members, starting at this grassroots movement? What can we do to adequately address this issue? Where can we find this funding? How can we go about this? Are we talking at grants? Are we talking about going to a state organization such as DACAP or the DNR and asking for more money? There's just a lot of questions I have right now, and I look forward to moving forward and engaging in this conversation with other county leaders.
Right, Nate, I think this is one of the best things that has come out of our discussion today, and really making sure that we as Farm Bureau members really take those active steps at our local level to making sure that we bring some of that taxpayer money back home, especially with some of the programs that do exist out at a state level, and making sure that conservation programs are implemented on a voluntary basis from producer-led efforts.
Yeah, it's very fortunate we live in a state where water is abundant, good quality. We're not highly regulated on it like the western states are, where they're only held to a certain quantity they can use. And it's only fitting that we're talking about it in the dells at the nation's water park capital of the world. So it's a good thing. Do you have anything else to add, Josh?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that came out of this whole discussion is the fact that each one of us want to go back to our county.
Time has been called. Please prepare your closing statements. I ask the audience to remain silent for 1 minute to aid the contestants in their preparation. Please put down your pens and in voluntary order, please stand and give your 1 minute closing statement.
As Farm Bureau members, we should be proud to know that we have the individuals in our organization that care. Not only us up here talking about water issues, but you in the crowd as well. Farm Bureau gives us that voice. I'm going to take that voice and use it to support the farmer-led water quality issues and implement those practices on my farm at home. I would like to thank Farm Bureau for giving us the opportunity here today to discuss these issues, and thank the Farm Bureau staff as well. I also want to thank our sponsors, Rural Mutual Insurance, the Growmark FS, and I'd like to end on our motto, a voice for farmers, a vision for agriculture. This morning I was up at 4:30 just walking around and come back and I seen that banner in the hallway. And if anybody of you know me that well, I'm not the one to talk out that much. And looking at that banner, a voice for farmers, Farm Bureau gave me that voice. Thank you.
Each one of us has a right to clean, plentiful water. We discussed how water policy started in the United States, the differences between Eastern and Western policy. We also discussed policy on the state level, and I think we definitely came to the conclusion that local-based state-level policy is best, especially when it comes to regulation. We also talked about the fact that as farmers and ranchers, we are best being proactive. We can change policy and make policy as we see fit, not when we get into burdensome regulation because of issues that have evolved, but ahead of those issues and maintaining an industry standard. I think each one of us is going to go back to our county farm bureaus and implement policies and work towards striving that larger goal. I myself am going to go back and work with my county and discuss these issues.
From our discussion today, I think it is safe to say that we need to take voluntary actions today or be subject to regulations tomorrow. I think we, as Farm Bureau members, have the opportunity to go back to our communities to be leaders in the agriculture industry in conserving water. We can do this by promoting farmer-led efforts at a local level to conserve water quality and water quantities, promote policies that are implemented at a state and local level, and also that are developed by having farmers and Farm Bureau members serving on advisory committees and in our communities and at the state level. Thank you.
My grandfather, a proud farmer and Farm Bureau member, once told me, "Neighbors helping one another is what builds communities." Today we were able to talk about the importance of water usage issues, not only for us as Farm Bureau members and agriculturalists, but for everyone else in our community that has a right to clean water and also usage of local lakes and other waterways. We were able to talk about some of those key issues. We were also able to talk about historical rights and what all of us are guaranteed. And then we were finally able to talk about solutions and what we can do as Farm Bureau members moving forward. I love my community. I love the agricultural lifestyle that I was brought up in. And because of that, I am blessed to be here today as a Farm Bureau member with the opportunity to move forward and implement positive change through my action plan by talking with Farm Bureau policy leaders about different policies that we can enact and being transparent and working with others in our community. I want to ensure that as a Farm Bureau member, that tomorrow and the day after and the day after are better than today and all the days that have come before.
Let's show these contestants our appreciation.